talking about if you are planning to volunteer with APIP to survey your lake for aquatic invasive species. First is about when to go out and do that survey. So we ask that you would monitor your lake, or if it's a large lake and there's a group of you doing the survey, a section of the lake, at least once mid-July to mid-September. And so we've put it in that time frame because by mid-July, a lot of the plants that we're looking for have grown either to the surface of the water. So things like Eurasian water milfoil would start to be at the surface, topping out, or it might have seeds or flowers that help with identification of our different invasive plants. And then also try to do your survey on a nice, calm, sunny day. Ideally, you know, if it's a day that you want to be out on the water with it being nice and sunny and calm, that's a good day to do your survey. And I would also recommend if you do your survey earlier in the morning, it's more likely to be calm and you'll have a better view into the water to look for aquatic plants. So we have a list of different equipment that I'd recommend using when you're out doing your survey. So first is a way to get out on the water, whether that's motorboat or canoe, but you can also do it from shore if needed. You'll also want to get a map of your lake or pond to help you with your survey, just to make sure that you have a good idea of, you know, all the different inlets and outlets of the lake to survey. And so if you have trouble getting a good map of the lake that you would like to survey, I can help you try to track one down. Also, you'll want, if you're going to do data sheets for your reporting, bring data sheets out with you. Or I will also talk about how you can use a device, either a phone or a tablet, to report on iMapInvasives, which is our statewide invasive species reporting database. If you're going to use data sheets, I'd recommend, if you have the ability, to have a GPS unit to help pinpoint where if you do find an invasive, where it is. I'd recommend bringing out paper towels and Ziploc bags, and that's because if you find a suspicious plant that you want help with identification, you can save that plant in that paper bag or plastic bag and bring it back. And so what we recommend is that you get your paper towel wet and then wring it out. You just want the paper towel damp, not soaking wet, and then put that in your plastic bag, and that will help conserve the plant while you're out and about. And then on that plastic bag, you can have put either masking tape or a label to keep track of the details of that plant that you've found. And then also a pencil or permanent marker to keep notes for the label. I recommend bringing either a jar or a bag or a little Tupperware container to float the plant in to help with identification. A lot of, with aquatic plants, if you have it floating in the water, it kind of allows it to float as it naturally is, and you'll more easily see the different characteristics to help with identification, which is optional, but I highly recommend it. That's what this photo in the upper right is an aquatic plant rake. And so I'll send out instructions on how to make one of these. But essentially what you do is you take two yard rakes and you attach them together so that you have the tines sticking out, and then attach a rope to it. And what you'll do with that is that if you're in the lake, then you can't see what's growing down underneath the surface of the water, you can throw this rake into the water, let it sink to the bottom of the lake, and then pull it back towards the boat, ideally 4 or 5 feet. And then that'll catch any aquatic plants that are growing, and you can pull it back into the boat. I also highly, highly recommend polarized sunglasses when you're doing your survey. The polarization helps cut the glare off the surface of the water, so you'll have a much better view into the water to see aquatic plants growing. If you're able to get a plant guide, I'd highly recommend that, bringing out on the water. As I've mentioned, I'll also send out some resources with some guides in them that will help you when you're in the field. I have a net on here, and so when you're boating around, it's helpful to have a net to catch different floating fragments, or I often find Chinese mystery snails, like the shells floating out in the middle of the lake. So if you have a net, you can easily grab any floating things that you want a closer look at. A small ruler and magnifying glass might help with identifications. I have a view scope on here, which is, this is John Nick on the bottom, who is using a view scope. And essentially it's a tube and it has a clear bottom to it. And so you can put that underneath the water and you have a nice magnified view of what's going on under the surface of the water. I have a camera on the list so that you can take, if you have a plant that you want to help with identification, you could snap some photos of it, as well as trying to grab a fragment to help with identification. And also you can take some photos of you all out there doing your surveys. I always love getting photos of volunteers out in the field. So please take them and send me photos. And then lastly, a cooler is on the list as optional. And that's just, if you can imagine on a hot, sunny day, if you have lots of little plastic bags of plants that you want help with identification of those samples, they'll do much better in a cooler than they would just in the sun. Oops. So talking more about monitoring protocol, so you have a lake that you're going to survey. What you do is you essentially do a meander survey or a zigzag survey along the shallow areas of the lake. And so you're trying to just get a good view of what we call the littoral zone, or where you'd have aquatic plants growing. And that'll vary in a lake how deep aquatic plants will grow to. If it's a more clear lake, you'll have plants growing deeper. But essentially our kind of rule of thumb is to try to go as close to shore as possible, and then to about 15 feet in depth. And ideally you're able to see into the lake and you can see the plants, and you're either like, there's no plants growing here, I see the bottom of the lake, or you see aquatic plants and you can either tell that they're not one of the invasives that we're worried about, or if you can't see what's going on underneath, you use that rake toss. And so you would stop and you would do a rake toss. We usually say 3 rake tosses, 1 off each side of the boat and then off the front or in a different direction, for each site that you try to get aquatic plants at. And so you're not doing the plant rake at set intervals. It's just if you feel like you've gone and you don't really know if there's plants growing underneath, then you would do some aquatic plant throws. There's some certain areas in the lake that you want to pay a special attention to. Inlets and outlets are always good places to look for invasive species. Definitely at boat launches where they might be introduced first. Also marinas are often areas that get invasives introduced to them. Beaches as well. Often, and also with the beaches, those sandy areas are great habitat for Asian clams. So they're definitely a place that I stop and take a closer look at. Existing native plant beds. If it's good for our native plants, often invasive species really like it. So it's a good place to take a closer look. And then also downwind shores. So a lot of our invasive plants will fragment. So you'll have those fragments of the invasives floating around, and so they'll get pushed downwind, and so they'll collect on the downwind shore. So that's always a good place to look as well. So you've been boating around and you think you found an invasive species. Now what do? You have 2 different ways that you can report an invasive plant bed. I'll provide a document with data sheets that you could fill out, or you could also use the iMapInvasives app. And so here is just a quick look at the data sheet that you would use if you found a bed of invasive plants. We have just the lake name, the town, the date that you did your survey. You would then, in that first column on the left, just assign an observation number to that bed. If you have a GPS available, you would provide the longitude or the latitude and longitude coordinates for that site so that we could come back and find it later if we need to. You would tell us what invasive species you think you found. If you're not confident to provide a name, but you're like, this is a suspicious plant, you could assign just a suspicious plant A if you wanted to. And then next we would get the estimate of the size of the plant bed. You would give a description of the distribution, the percent cover, and then also at what depth did you find the plants growing. And then I also have columns there for observation ID and assessment ID, which is information that you would get from iMapInvasives if you filled that out. Okay, so that's the data sheet option. You could also have your phone or a tablet out with you that you would have an iMapInvasives mobile app on it. And so this is an easy way to report an invasive species if you find it. And so you should be able to find the iMapInvasives mobile app wherever you would get, your app store. And so with the iMapInvasives, when you open it up, this is what it looks like. And you would just say add an observation up there at the top. And what's great about this is that right there at the top of your observation, you are able to include a photo of the invasive that you found. And then you would just scroll down. You'd be able to say, what species did you find? And then as you scroll down, so for my example here, I'm saying Eurasian water milfoil was detected. It gives the date, and then you would use the GPS for just marking the location on the app. Within the app, you would be able to say that you were working with the APIP Volunteer Lake Monitoring Program. You provide the amount of time searched, as well as an estimate of the size of the invasive bed and a description of that bed, of the distribution. And then at the bottom there's opportunities for comments as well. And so you would do that for each bed that you came across of a invasive. And so as I mentioned, we'd talk a little bit more about mystery plants. If you did find a suspicious plant that you didn't feel confident in saying that it was for sure an invasive, as we talked about, you would collect a fragment of that sample. You would put it in a plastic bag with a damp paper towel and label it. But then the first thing that I would have you do is try to send a photo of the plant. And so ideally with that photo, you would float it in water, as my example here. You would have a white background if possible. It's just with a white background, it helps make the details of the plant pop. You would include something for scale. So in my photo here, I have a ruler, but you could also use a coin, a pair of keys, but yeah, just something for scale. And then ideally you would take a photo of the complete plant or the fragment that you have, and then zoomed in photos of either the seeds or flowers or anything that might help with identification. With milfoils, thinking about like if you can take just a single leaf from that whirl of leaves, the shape and number of leaflets and all those things help with the plant experts for identification. Larry, I'll definitely ask if I missed anything, if you wanted to chime in with that. But yeah, you would send me that email of the photo, and if I wasn't able to help with identification, I would tap into Larry or other plant experts for identification.
I think you've covered it pretty well.
Okay, good. Okay. And then also just, as a reminder, as you leave the lake, we don't want to be the ones helping spread these invasive species. So making sure to clean, drain, and dry or treat your boat. And when I say treat, I'm talking about the high pressure hot water wash stations. just to make sure that we're not the ones, you know, helping these guys get around the waters. And then when you're done, I would just want you to submit your survey details. I usually ask, you know, by October to get me those survey details. And so again, you have two different options that you can submit your survey details. You can either do it, again, we have a second data sheet that you can get me the lake name, the dates that you did your surveying, you know, did you find any target invasive species? So more of those specific details for your survey. Or you could use iMapInvasives. And so in some of the follow-up materials that I send out after this training, I do have examples of how you fill out the survey forms if you have specific questions about that. And then, so the other option is using iMapInvasives to enter your survey details. And I just want to show everybody what that looks like to get you a little bit more familiar. So here is iMapInvasives, which is our statewide invasive species reporting. And they keep the records of all both terrestrial and aquatic invasive species distribution. And so for iMapInvasives, those who haven't used it before, you would have to get a login information, which you would just do. You can sign up right down here for that. And then to report your survey and your searched area, I'll see if, I know sometimes the internet does not load fast enough for doing this real time. But so you would just zoom in to whichever lake you surveyed. So I'm gonna zoom in here for Racket Lake as my example. And then what you would do, so all of these little dots that are showing up are confirmed present species for those sites for where it's been confirmed before. But for your survey, you would just go to this create record. And then you would go to the new record and you would do a multi-record searched area. And then you can, it has this nice option of putting in the area that you searched. So you can make it a polygon, a point, a line. For my example, I'm just gonna do a polygon and I'm gonna say that I searched this bay of Racket Lake. So you would just go through and you would do that. And then you can go through it and add the details of if there's kind of, this is kind of, you know, if you had already entered the points through the iMap app, you would not have to do those at this point. Or you could go in and you could add each of the points of the invasive that you found here. And so then you can just put your points that you were able to find for your invasive species. And you would just go that for each one. You would enter that. Oops. I think there's a test. Okay, so for my example, I'm just going to put in a fake testing species, but you would put in whatever species you found. You would put in your observer information, the date that you found it, and then you'd have the opportunity to add photos. And so you, again, you would do that for each of the invasives that you found. We are not doing treatment records, so you would just say next. You could also say, so I searched that area for not only, you know, the invasive that I found, but I also searched for like Eurasian water milfoil and etc. And you can just add all of the different species that you had your eye out for as well and did not find. And then once you've gone through that, you would just say complete. And then we would also have your searched area information at the end of the year. And so I know that's a quick overview, but I just wanted to give you a quick idea of what iMapInvasives reporting was like. And I will follow up after this webinar with materials as to how exactly you step through that reporting on either the data sheet or iMapInvasives. And so with that, we're getting towards the end, but I just, before I take any final questions, I really wanted to thank everyone, both for the past volunteering that you've done with APIP, as well as hopefully this year you'll be able to get out and do some surveys looking for aquatic invasive species with us. And so all of your effort that you're doing out there looking for invasives is such a valuable resource for us. And so definitely thank you. And we are here as resources as you go out and you do your surveys. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us with questions about surveying, about identification, etc. And with that, we can take questions in the chat box. Is probably the easiest again. Okay. To clean a canoe or kayak that is moving from water to water 5 days, if 5 days of dry time is not feasible. And so with canoes and kayaks, they are less likely to be carrying an invasive species, just fewer areas that they can get, you know, trapped on or, you know, hitch a ride on. But there is instances where we've seen canoes and kayaks with invasive species attached. So definitely still do inspect your canoe or kayak, remove any attached plants, animals, or mud. And then if possible, I would take it to one of the boat wash stations with a high pressure hot water wash station to have it cleaned off before you go into another waterway. If you can't let it dry or you can't take it to a boat wash station, rinsing, you know, taking a yard hose and rinsing it off really good and then drying it with a rag is also an option. Not as good as the high pressure hot water, but it still will remove invasives as well. Next question is, are the 2020 data reporting sheets downloadable from APIP's website yet? And I would say, no, they are not posted on the website yet. I still need to update them. So when they are updated, we will make them available, hopefully on our new website. And then I'll also be sending up a follow-up material to everybody who's on this call, as well as our listservs. If you are on this call today and you did not register, I'd say definitely shoot either myself or Emily Bell an email, and we'll make sure that you're added to that list for following up. So, sorry, I know it's a little awkward with me looking through the chat for questions. So thank you everybody for sticking with us. But I think that's about it. Any last comments, Larry or Emily? Otherwise, I think we'll sign off.
I guess the only thing I would add would be, don't hesitate to send us specimens, even if you don't think it's an invasive. We'll try to give you an idea of anything that you are curious about.
Yeah, we definitely have a passion for the native species too, not just the invasives.
I see one
Okay.
more comment, Aaron from Joe, and he says, are there groups looking for volunteers to help with removal of invasives from, I'm assuming, of plants and animals?
Like, so more management side of things.
I think so.
So Yeah, I guess I didn't touch much on management of aquatic invasive species in the Adirondacks. And so we do have, quite a few both lake associations, lake managers, municipalities who are managing different aquatic invasive species in our waters. I'd say the vast majority of management is on Eurasian water milfoil populations. And often it's done through hand harvesting by divers. And so a lot of that work is done as, people, the lake associations and lake managers are contracting people to do that. However, we do have some instances where people are getting together volunteers to do the management as well. I don't right now have contacts for that, but if you're interested in trying to learn more about management, feel free to reach out to me and I'll follow up. With the summer, there's not as many opportunities for things like hand harvesting water chestnut. I know in Lake Champlain, sometimes we've had water chestnut pulls where you could come and help with that, harvesting water chestnut. This summer, I don't think that's happening as much with the COVID-19 pandemic, but we hope to stay in touch with people with those opportunities in the future as they come along.
The last
I think
thing
everybody needs to be aware.
Oh, go ahead, Larry.
I was just saying that people need to be aware that any management effort of aquatic plants requires a permit from the Adirondack Park Agency, with the exception of some small hand-pulling operations on your own waterfront.
Yes, yeah, very good point, Larry.
Sorry, Emily.
Oh, that's okay. That actually sort of leads me to my next point of, Erin had mentioned that we do have a new website, in addition to our new logo. But our website, it's here to serve our volunteers and community members. And so if you're a longtime volunteer and you go to our website and you see something that you used to use or used to educate neighbors with and it's not there, please email me, and it's a work in progress and we're building it up. And we want to make sure it's serving everyone's needs. In addition, if you're, new to, getting involved, or are a seasoned researcher like Larry, and you go to our website and say, oh, I think I could really use more information on XYZ, or there's no link to the permitting process from the Adirondack Park Agency, feel free to shoot me an email, because it's an education tool and we want it to work for you. So thank you guys so much for participating and wanting to get involved.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. With that, I think we're at noon, so we're going to sign off. But yes, please.
Bye.
You're silly.